Welcome, Dr. Powell. My name is William Dickerson. I'm a student at Southern University in the Business Graduate Program. My major is Supply Chain Management. I also have a minor in Human Resources. Today I'll be discussing my chapter 4 decision making and what I felt about the chapter, what was important in the chapter, and how did I discuss the chapter and the things that I got from the chapter. Starting off with decision making. Decision making is very important. It's the act of choosing one alternative from another alternative among a set of alternatives. It's very good to have a good decision making executive in business, someone that recognizes the facts of the matter when they're taking a process and just making a decision. A person that is grounded, one that has good beliefs, one that has an adaptation to the culture that they are making decisions for. I think that's very important. That's one thing I got from the message of this decision-making chapter. The decision is very important. It identifies the set of feasible alternatives before selecting a goal. It is very important to have everything out when you're making a decision. What is important to you? How do you get to that decision? What is the results of this decision? Can it help others? And what will it do if it's a bad decision, and how will it affect others is very important. So recognizing the nature of the decision, recognizing who's going to make that decision and what that person has to lose from making that decision. You might have somebody that's in form of business, that is the business decision maker for a business, and has no reputation for making sound decisions. He might get on the phone and make a phone call and come up with a decision, and if he's pressed where he can't get to that phone to make that decision, he has to make it on a whim, he might make a bad decision. So it's very important to make sure you have the correct people in place when making decisions, people that push buttons, people that say the yeses, people that say the nos, and can explain why they say the yeses and why they make the nos. Effective decision making, the decision maker needs to understand the situation at hand during the decision making time. He needs to understand why his yeses mean yes and his nos mean no. There are certain type of decisions that people make. They have program decisions, which are decisions that are structured and react off a certain type of frequency that you will get regardless of what the decision is. That is a program decision making. It's always going to be a certain way for a company that these type of reactions require these type of decision making. You also have non-program decisions where that person is going to make a decision off what they value, what they deem important, what they feel is good, what is their grit. Non-program decision makers basically they make relativity decisions. They make decisions on basically how they feel things should go and how things are instituted within that society, inside that culture of that program. They occur much less often because people do have checks and balances. A lot of companies do have checks and balances. It's not like you're going to have an executive going on a whim, doing what he feels and how he feels he should do it, any way, shape, or form. So most companies have very, very structured decision-making process where it's not just one person making a decision. It's a group of people, and they have a certain system and set for them to do that decision-making process. It is programmed. It is a decision that is relatively there for people to make that decision, and they're not going to do anything out of the ordinary when making decisions. Most of these decisions are very programmed. The conditions that these people make these decisions are sometimes different conditions. Decision making under certainties know that reasonable certainty is made with alternative decision making. They have to have an idea that if they make a decision, their life is on the line. The way they feed their family is on the line. They can't make a decision that's going to just change the whole structure of a company and not have repercussions for it. A state of certainty knows exactly what they will do, when they do it, and how they do it. And a lot of people on boards pay attention to that. They want somebody that has a grit to them. They know that that person is going to do a certain type of decision making. It's going to be sound. It's going to be focused. It's going to be focused on the business. It's going to be focused on the foundation. Like we spoke about last week, certain companies in their business structure and their business statements, they have foundations that are very important to the company. Decision making under risk is another thing we talked about in this chapter. The availability of each alternative and its potential payoffs for making that decision, and costs are all dedicated around making the decision with probability and estimates in line. Some companies make decisions and the person that's making the decision doesn't think 5 years ahead of time, 5 steps ahead of time of what they're doing with this chessboard that they're playing on. They might make a decision and not realize the repercussions of the factors that they have made, and the whole company suffers for it. Organizational decisions are another thing that people discuss when they're making decisions. Today are made under organization. So is a certain person that speaks for an organization, he doesn't make the decision for himself. And that comes from basically traits all the way can be traced back to ancient Africa, where certain tribes would have certain people that were allowed to speak for certain people, but they could make a sound decision by themselves without speaking to the elders of the community to make that decision. They might look as the person that controls things, but however, they weren't controlling anything because they were only the factual person that could talk. So every organization has a decision maker, but he's there as a figurehead to represent the whole organization, and they cannot make a decision that would deem untruthful or unjust for that organization without repercussions. These people have to be loyal. These people have to be logical. They have to have a sound mind. They have to be somebody that's not ruled by, you could say, greed, ego, flatterization, and people that would just boost their ego to make them have a rational judgment or a slip of judgment at that time. A state of uncertainty decision would be when a decision maker doesn't know all the alternatives. They don't know all the risks, so they're going to go from their gut. They're going to take a decision based on what they see is right at the time. And that's where you pay a person to have those type of skill sets, where they can make a decision, a sound decision, and know that it's a good decision in their mind. And that type of person would have to have a great foundation. And like we spoke about last week, a foundation is something that people have in their business culture. That's why it's very important to ground people and root people up in a certain type of mindset, where if they come up through the ranks, they'll have this mindset of knowing this is a dream and aspiration that the people that own this business or started this business that you represent knew that this is what they want. And I believe that's why every college student, graduate student, should have some type of business or some type of business plan to start a business to represent their families. So if you have a certain type of business or business plan, you will know the risks and you will know how to move accordingly with the risks and what the risks involve or what they do dissolve into. Because all in all, every business is family oriented. Every business's goal is to take care of self and to take care of family, take care of culture, take care of the people that believe in them and the people they believe in. So that state of uncertainty decision making, it does not know all the alternatives at the time and the risks that are associated with the alternatives at the time, but likely they know the consequences of all the alternatives, because that's a classic basic decision making. The basic classical model of decision making perspective approach tells managers to know everything before they make a decision, how they should make a decision, why they should make a decision, and at what point should they make a decision. They should have a complete info of every situation to eliminate the uncertainty, eliminate the things that they feel are not good in making that decision making. I believe people should follow the classic basic model of decision making, because if you don't understand something, you can't feel it in your gut to know you're doing wrong or right or wrong per se. You just are shooting from the hip in the dark, and that's not a good thing. That's a very dangerous thing with business, because bad decision making, irrational decision making can cause major flaws in a business. You should have people that you talk to, people that you weigh decisions out with, and in certain industries, it's very important to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. In certain business industries that I'm in, certain businesses that I'm involved with, I'll talk to my business partner, which is my wife, and I'll run something by her, and I'll make sure, is this worthwhile, or what do you feel about this? Have you heard about this situation? I also have close friends that I'll talk to. Well, what is the price that you're getting for this, and what do you think about this? What did this person tell you? It's good to have alternative means when you're making decision making. It's good to know people in the industry. It's good to know characters. It's good to know bad characters also, because you can know the type of games that they run, so you can stay away from them. So sometimes it's good to have a well just of the industry that you are dealing with, even if you come in as an outsider not knowing. Sometimes it's good to not show your hand. And that's another thing that's real good with decision making. I didn't get that from the message, that just comes from experience. But also recognizing and defining the decision structure is another thing. You need to find out and recognize the structure when picking up decision making, deciding whether to replace an object or repair an object. So prime example is in a business I have, a decision would be whether to deal with this certain company in China or to whether deal with Amazon when purchasing this product or go directly to the source. Due to coronavirus, a lot of these companies were not dealing directly with people in China, not even over the phone. So you was basically dealt the hand that you were dealing with Amazon. The good thing with Amazon cuts out the middleman. However, another business model of them and a business practice to them is they destroy the middleman. So I don't know if you want to learn that, but they do destroy the middleman. They will take the business from the middleman and make it their business. So that's what they do. So that's how they connect to people like in China. They will take the middleman out, and the middleman will not eat off of his business at all. So that's one thing you can decide in the business model that you're making a decision on. Will this affect me in the future? How will it affect me in the future? What can I do for this in the future? If somebody decides to take me out of the game, how can I rebound from this? What is the situation and what is the repercussions for the situation if I'm brought to that situation? That's the type of things you can pay attention to with decision making. You can evaluate the alternatives. What is the purpose of the alternatives? Will the alternatives do better for me? If it's a person that's the alternative, can I go to the alternative? Maybe we can get together and outweigh the push that they want me to go a certain way, and I can make me another road. I can evaluate the road that they want me to go by. Is it feasible for me to go down that road? So evaluating alternatives is very important. Selecting the best alternative for you is another thing that's important. Will this better me as a person? Will this better my company? Will this better my alternative if I go this way? Or implementing a certain type of alternative. I might have 3 different type of alternatives I can use. Which one would be the best for me? How would I go about getting to that alternative? This is things that people have to study. You have to plan, you have to plot, you have to strategize when you're making decisions. Because these decisions also have repercussions with them. And it can bring you to a situation where you won't be able to get out of. So you have to pay attention. That's why it's good to have a good base, a good sound knowledge base, good information base, and to take care of your base. A lot of people in the business world don't have humility, and I believe humility brings about a solid foundation of a sound mind. As if you have humility, you'll be able to see things that other people can't see, that have ego, that are drawn by ego. So a good decision maker is never driven off or fueled off egotistical behavior. Self-fulfilling behavior is not good in the business world. Even though a lot of business men thrive off egotistical behavior, it also can be a failure, because if the enemy knows that your egotistical behavior is what fuel you, he will set you up with an alternative to fail yourself. So you have to also follow up and evaluate the results of the situations that you are getting in. Another thing that you can pay attention, I learned from reading this chapter, is evidence-based management. And you have to face the hard facts and build a culture around the hard facts. You have to be committed to the best fact-based decision-making that you can find for your place, for your business, and for your culture. Treat your organization as an unfinished product, a prototype that changes on demand. You have to learn to how to adapt to certain situations. If you follow a certain train of thought all the time, your opposition, your enemy will always know that if I go this way, he'll go this way. And I will train to have the bridge cut off and have him come back and deal with me. I've learned from some businessmen that I work for, you can have an enemy, but the best way to treat your enemy is to court your enemy. And I learned that from a very important businessman. By courting your enemy means that you treat him like a friend, and you find out what he depends on, and you become what he depends on, and you cut his breathing supply off. And then he becomes your friend, and you have him anyway to walk and feed him how you feel and how you deem fit. And a lot of people don't realize that. And a prime example of a business model that follows that to the T is Amazon. Amazon will have certain people that deal with them, and they will think they are business partners with Amazon, well, let alone they are sacrificed to Amazon. They will be sacrificed, and Amazon will feed off them for many years to come. And that's why the business model that Amazon has grows and grows and continues to grow. And that is one thing I learned from the business of other businessmen, is to be humble. And while being humble, never let anybody know what you thrive on, what constantly helps you thrive, because they will take what you thrive off and make it something that you fail off of. So it's very important to have a humble mind. Treat your organization as an unfinished business. Never get satisfied in anything you do. Never lack for anything you do. Avoid basing decisions off emotion. Avoid basing decisions off untested value systems, off of untested beliefs. Look for the risks and all the drawbacks in everything that you study. Pay attention to the constant setbacks, because some people will set you back just to see how you respond, just to see if you give up, just to see how you react. So behavioral aspects of decision making would be something that also that we studied, was administrative model. How decisions are often actually are designed and implemented. Use how certain companies use incomplete models, imperfective, informal, constrained rationality, and statistical information. Some companies will do things irrational just to have that type of information out there, that people will think that this company does erratic things. They do strange business practices. They do not normal behavior in companies to have people not figuring out which way they will go. You never know which way that company will move. And it tends to satisfy some companies to move around like that. Bounded rationality is another thing we studied, a concept suggesting that markets and decision makers are limited by their values and their unconscious reflexes, skills, and habits. And bounded rationality would be somebody, they know that if I make a certain individual mad a certain way, he will come a certain way for me. And that's chess moves. Certain people will be like, okay, I will do this certain thing, and it's more often sure than never that he will move this certain way to satisfy his ego or satisfy the way he wants to do things. Also, another thing we have is satisfying tendencies, to search for alternatives only one feels is satisfying to their need. Meet some type of minimum status of sufficiency, minimum status of gratitude for them. A coalition is another one. It's an informal alliance of individuals or group formed to achieve a certain agreement. And I believe in coalitions. It's good to have a coalition up front and a coalition behind closed doors. It might be an ally that people think they are enemies, but behind closed doors on phones and in business meetings behind closed doors, after hours, they're friends to help get a common goal achieved, which might be to get a certain business out the way that both of them have, that are having their hands tied. So coalitions are very important. Another thing, good business decision. People make good business decision. Companies have is intuition, which is called your gut, your grit. And intuition is an intimate belief that certain things will go a certain way, conscious and unconscious considerations of how things will move. The intuition. So a lot of companies have people, and they pay CEOs to have good intuition, that if I move my company a certain way, it's more than soon this will follow. Escalation of commitment. A decision maker stays with a commitment. He might live by it, he might die by it, but it appears to be that certain way. Whether it's wrong or right, he's going to stay that way. He's not going to give up on it. That's his intuition. That's what he believes in. That's what he's going to follow. The risk propensity. What is the risk that he gets from going a certain way? What's the stint? Does the risk outweigh the reward, or does the reward outweigh the risk, may I say? Certain people will put a risk up and they'll do it, not knowing what they get out of it. They might go a certain way and they could have got it another way. So risk propensity is the extent to which a decision maker is willing to gamble. How far is he willing to go to forward his company? Some risk makers are fueled by greed. And a lot of companies fail because of that risk maker. And they might not know while he's doing that, he's making the decision that if I fail this company, I'm going to take this decision that I made and profit myself and suffer other people for it. So you have to pay attention to a person. I believe every company head that has a decision maker that's not themselves, that they hire people to make certain decisions, you have to vet these people. I believe sometimes you have to tell people fake information just to see if you're going to get what you need out of them and the type of response that you get out of them. I would tell them some off the wall, something that's totally fabricated, just to see what's the response that you get out these people. Will you get a vain response? Will you get an anger response? Because you want to know what people are like at their worst moment. Because that's the intuition, that's the grit that you're going to get. You're going to get the foundation of what they are. You're going to get their core value set when they're pushed to the limit. Interacting groups, decision making sometimes is good when you have an interacting group of a certain type of individuals that come together with different mindset, different value sets to come up with a good decision for a company. Delphi group is another thing. We studied a group decision making in which a group arrives at a certain decision from expert opinions in the group. Then you have a nominal group, it's a structured group, a technique used to generate creative and innovating decisions. All these different type of groups have their disadvantages and their advantages to them. Some advantages to a interactive group would be you get a good decision. You have people outweighing the pros and the cons. Advantage of a Delphi group would be a group making a decision with an expert opinion, but you never know what made them have an expert opinion. Experts sometimes would be failures because some biggest problem with experts, they don't know how to adapt. And in business, you have to adapt at a minute's notice because it could be failure or not failure. And the thing about a nominal group is some people are there, but they're not pulling their load. So you have to pay attention. You have to weigh out the good and the bad. I think decision making is something a company needs to follow their grit. A company needs to be based in a sound decision mind. I think the executive decision makers for that company have to follow their business model to a T. I believe you have to vet them. I believe that people should be on one accord. If you have somebody that doesn't know the business model, they don't know the history of that company, they don't know why it was started, they don't know the family outcome of the business. I believe before you get to a certain point with that company, you have to love it. You have to live for it and die for it. And if you don't have anybody that's willing to live or die for what they believe in, they shouldn't be in decision-making process for you because they will have you die for something you don't believe in. So I believe when you're a business owner, you gotta live and die by your product, live and stand by what you believe in. You have to believe in it because people can sense in your decisions that you don't believe the things you're talking about out your mouth. So I believe decision-making is a very important process. It's a live by, die by code, and that's American way. And America is not going to change no time soon. So you have to get with the program. And if you don't have an executive decision-making person that's willing to move in a certain way, whether it's good or bad, whether it be intentional or non-intentional, or whether they have a bad aura about them because of decision-makings that they have, you won't have anything. Because sometimes controversy is good, and some people live and thrive off controversy. You might have an executive decision maker that thrives off confusion, that thrives off people talking about them, but while people are talking about them, they're making certain moves for that company to be productive and lucrative. So I believe executive decision making is something that is born into people. It's something that can't be trained. Either you have it or you don't have it. And a lot of people don't have it, but the people that do have it, they are compensated very well and handsomely for their experiences, their expertise, and their traits of goodness. So I believe it's something that you're groomed to. It's something that you can learn under certain people. But if you want your business to be successful, you have to have that grit. You have to have that it factor to move when it's time to move and know when it's time to fold them. Kind of like a gambler, like the song Willie Rogers. So if you don't pay attention to certain things with your company and your business, expert decision making can be a fluke and a failure. But I believe all companies do have the ability to redeem themselves. And another thing I could mention before I close out this video, study your competition. Know your enemy. Know the weaknesses of your enemy. Know the strengths of your enemies. And we learned that through SWOT analysis in the previous chapters last week. You have to know what's their strengths, what their weaknesses, what their ops are, and what their tactics are, what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. Because some people will throw you off by doing things that they know they're not capable of doing, or telling you things that they know they're not in no way, shape, or form being able to complete or perform. So I believe it's very important with executive decision and sound decision making tactics to know your groups, know your outlooks, know your purpose, and know your plans, and know the solutions that you want to take to get to your plans and create your goals. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this is well. Thank you.